hold on. How could you complain? You've got lights that are flickering. You've got sprinklers going off, car hoods revving, lights flowing, people swinging swords, Queen blaring. This is the way you start a movie.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I am one of your three hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me, I've got Big D Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Lyons.
I have something to say. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
And each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 4 movie choices that we then break out our VHS race car tape rewinders and watch the movie that tally the highest number of votes. At the end of each podcast, the three of us will provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thanks so much for listening. You can find us everywhere, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, whatever fine podcasts are found. Thanks for listening. Big D, this week's theme was fantasy movies, correct? And it was by far our most hotly contested, and there was possible Russia tampering and involvement.
Well, actually, there was some international interference, but it was Japan.
Oh, it was Japan.
It was Japan, but then also there was some influence in Kansas City, Missouri. That were stuffing the ballot box for, it was Conan the Barbarian, and then in the last days, they packed in like 650 votes for Legend, and that's when we knew something was up, and it was bullshit.
Wait a minute. So you're saying the hot spots of Japan and Kansas City, Missouri for Legend?
Yeah, I don't know why. Yes, I was notified by one of our listeners that there was something fishy. There was something strange afoot. So I actually stopped the voting, went in, checked the IP addresses, and yes, there was. It seemed like there was some coordinated attack on the integrity of our voting. So I stripped away all the duplicates, and we went down with just one vote, one person, and Highlander was the clear winner.
I've got a theory. Scientologists.
That's right. That's right. So the 4 movies up were Conan the Barbarian, the original Highlander movie, Legend, and there was a 4th one. What was the 4th one?
Willow.
That's right. Willow. We just can't seem to do a damn Val Kilmer movie yet, and I know Gene is really upset about that.
I'm a big fan of Willow. I really wanted to see Willow. And I remember the first week, I think you guys even talked to me about doing this show. There was just the idea was floated of Willow, and I think that's the only reason I joined.
Yeah, we promised you we would do Willow. I think that was part of the agreement back months ago when you started. We were like, yeah, we'll do Willow. Why not? Yeah, but by far our fans in Scotland, led by our great friend Marty over there at Great Northern Radio, was really pushing for this movie Highlander, and he really, I mean, he was retweeting the heck out of this. It came down to. What was the final vote once you stripped away and did your investigation?
Oh, I'm going off the top of my head. I think it was something like 46%, and then it was 18, 16, and then like 5, something.
Oh, okay. So Highlander won by a large margin.
Oh, well, it wasn't even close.
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to get into it, but I think there's a few Americans that would like that to be looked at as well for us. But, guys, I had never seen this movie. So this was a treat for me. This was a great Valentine's Day present that you put in my inbox.
So we can't even ask you where you saw it first because you just told us.
Right, exactly.
So you have no memory. For me, my dad took me because this was 86, so I was too young to see it. I've always been, and it's embarrassing to say, a huge like ninja fan.
What?
Like I love ninja movies. I love Ninja 3. I think it was a Domination, American Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja. All of them are great.
Anything with a ninja in it? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, The Secret of the Ooze?
3 Ninjas Kick Back.
No, it was actual.
Three Ninjas Magic Mountain?
No, I wanted real, what I thought were ninjas. So I went out to the flea market. I bought a couple throwing stars. I would practice on the tree. I was saving up to get some cheap katana. I wanted to be a ninja.
Now, Raj, you didn't have ninja fever because when I was a kid, I also I remember I got tonsillitis once, and my mom went out and bought me these 2 ninja toys, and they had like the actual cloth outfits and throwing stars and swords and stuff. I was obsessed with them, and then I had the idea of taking an elastic band out of my mom's sewing kit, tying it around my waist, and trying to ninja jump off the second floor. And I'm not a ninja.
Yeah, no. So there was definitely an '80s ninja phase that every kid goes through, and it's strange. And if you had a ninja phase that you went through, please do so. So my story with ninja phases is there was a popular show in the '80s and in the '90s. I think it's still on today. It's called America's Funniest Home Videos, and my grandparents had a video camera. They were one of the early adopters of technology, and they used to film everything. Well, I got one Christmas or birthday, I think it was Christmas, I got a ninja outfit, and I was so excited about this ninja outfit, and I put it on, and I was doing my ninja moves, and I went to do like a really cool roundhouse kick a la Patrick Swayze, who I envisioned as a ninja as well. And I did that. They had in my grandparents' house, they had those 70s style swing Westworld doors, and I fell back because my balance as a chunky child in a ninja outfit was not the greatest, and I fell through those doors and onto the ground. It was so brilliant that they watched this every Christmas in my household, and it was the one video that I'm convinced we would be millionaires today if we had submitted that into America's Funniest.
Where is that video?
Oh, it's somewhere. I'm sure they've transferred it to Laserdisc by now.
In Orlando, or?
Nah, it's in Orlando.
I'll go to the archives. I'll go tomorrow.
That's right.
They are right down the road. I will find that tape.
Yeah, listen, every podcast is looking for that one thing that's going to make them go viral. This could be it for us. This could be our big break. You got to get that video, Raj.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. But guys, there's no ninjas in this movie. I don't understand where the ninjas came up. There's no ninjas. How are you excited about this movie?
Because they're sword fighting.
Yeah, there's an oddly placed katana blade. So I mean,
there is. But all right. So if you've never listened to the show, here's how it goes. We will give the plot of the movie. We'll discuss it, and in the end, we'll give our Shat meter about it. Highlander is a 1986 British-American epic adventure action fantasy film directed by Russell
Mulcahy.
Mulcahy. Anyway, yeah, it stars Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery. The film narrates the climax of an ages-old battle between immortal warriors depicted through interwoven past and present-day storylines. Big D, roll the trailer.
Because you were born different, men will fear you, try to drive you away.
I am Conor MacLeod. I am immortal.
Here we are, born to be kings. We're the princes of the universe.
You will always be weaker than I.
And here we are, we're the princes of the universe. Here we belong, fighting for survival. We've got to be the rulers of you all. Take me to the future of you all. There can be only one.
Now, guys, again, I watched this movie today, earlier this afternoon. It was my first time. I felt kind of a fraud because I had used the phrase, there can only be one, for the better half of 15 years, without really truly understanding the context. Does that make me a fraud?
No, I think there's a lot of phrases in the American lexicon that people don't know the origin of. The fact that you didn't know sometimes people were using it ironically, that's a little odd. I mean, if you were you using it seriously when you said that?
I was totally using it seriously. Had no idea that they were using it ironically. Like, I thought this movie was cool. It was not.
This movie is cool.
This movie is terrible. I don't know how many movies we've done, 17 now. This is the longest it was a sludge fest for me. We just did Terminator 2 where we saw the extended version, and it's like 3 hours long, and it was great. This movie, if you watch the real unedited European version that we did, it's 156 minutes long.
Look, in 2016, HBO tried to do multiple timelines on Westworld and confuse the shit out of people. So they were trying to do this is the early days of multiple timelines. You can see how it doesn't quite work all the time.
Yeah, I think even at almost 2 hours, it was a bit bloated. If they could have cut down maybe 10, 15 minutes and tightened up some of the scenes, it would have been much more enjoyable. But at the end of the day, as I'm watching it, I'm looking at the clock. I could feel it, and that's my internal clock saying, the pacing's a bit off.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that this movie was bad and slow.
Why? You're bashing it already.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm going to bash it throughout the entire episode.
I think by the end,
Spoiler alert. I texted you, had Christopher Lambert ever acted before this movie?
Yeah, he had done Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, but I didn't know he didn't speak English.
Yeah.
And in that movie, if you've seen it, I have, and I remember seeing that one, he's shirtless and he's much like Tom Hardy in Taboo. It's a lot of grunting, animal noises, very few, spoken word. In this one, they were under the impression, producers, that he spoke English, but he had a heavy accent. He shows up, and they got something very special. It was an actor who had been speaking English for all of about 6 weeks.
Which is interesting because he was born in New York City. But when he was 2, apparently his father, who's a diplomat, moved the family to Geneva, where he grew up largely in boarding schools.
What was odd is I felt when we were seeing 1500 Scotland, his accent and his vocal pattern didn't really bother me. I almost felt okay with it. But when you threw him into modern day or 1985, 86 New York City, and he tried to have any kind of conversation with someone in modern day New York, it was too stark of a contrast. And you could tell. There's a point where he tries to say coroner, and he says coroner, and it was almost comical. So half of the movie it worked. Second half, I think it really hurt it.
So I am a fan of this movie, but I've got to say that one point I need to get across is that I'm going to be critical, mostly on this episode, of appearances. And Rod, you mentioned that he was kind of picked for his looks. I don't get that at all, because this dude is one of the weirdest looking dudes I've ever seen. His eyes are set oddly. His face is kind of weird, like everything about it. And when he has longer hair, you can kind of get away with it, but his short haircut look in the 80s looks ridiculous.
Hold on. Have you seen Twilight? Robert Pattinson. Is that his name?
Pattinson, right? Isn't it Pattinson?
Yeah, I think it's Pattinson.
Pattinson.
We could look it up.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Pattinson, yes, Pattinson.
Okay, you've seen Twilight. That Jacob character, he's not a good-looking dude if he's not on film.
Oh, he's ripped.
Drool over him.
Oh, Jacob is ripped. That body?
Oh, is Jacob the wolf? Or
Yeah,
which
Jacob's the wolf.
Oh, yeah, he's hot. He's chubby now, but I'm talking the vampire.
Is he chubby? He got chubby?
Oh, he got chubby.
Really?
Yes, it'll make you feel good. But the vampire, he's not an attractive guy.
Right, you're talking about Edward.
Yes.
Okay, but here's the thing, is that Edward Cullen and Jacob, the werewolf, they can speak English. So they can act at least. This guy's picked for his look. I mean, look at Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, he is often featured on this podcast. Arnold Schwarzenegger, yeah, his English wasn't that great, but look at him. Like, okay, we get it.
Yeah. The other thing I learned, Big D, that you came across this as well, is he was pretty deadly with a sword. In the most literal of senses.
Yeah, not deadly in a good way. He was. They picked him also for Tarzan because he was very physical. He was a physical actor. He did a lot of the stunts. He thought he was an athlete, so he got a little too excited using the sword and actually injured a few people on set. And there was one where he almost cut Sean Connery pretty bad, and they had to stop shooting. So deadly in a bad way.
Well, that's because he's blind. Like, he can't wear contacts, and so he literally cannot see unless he's wearing corrective lenses. So anytime you see Christopher Lambert on screen, I get now why it kind of looks like he's looking off to the side of an actor or actress that he's playing against because he's blind. Christopher Lambert cannot see past 3 feet in front of him.
By that definition, I'm blind too. So
yeah,
thanks for picking on my.
Yeah, but
my
you can wear contacts. You can wear. I can listen. I'm as blind as a bat. I've got daredevil senses. But listen, this movie I thought was going to be good because the opening sequence has probably the best opening song of a movie of all time. I was jazzed up. I was excited. And then some sort of wrestling scene came on and it completely threw it. But Queen is throughout this entire movie.
Yeah, Queen really makes this movie, as you mentioned from that opening scene. You've got, the sound hits. You've got that red jiggly text that you've seen in Stranger Things during the opening credits, which is actually done. That's a very 80s cool trick where they kind of push light through a film sheet. That made me so happy. And then that sound hits from the opening notes of Princess of the Universe. And remember, Queen does these huge theme songs through several movies, like Flash Gordon. They did this. And they really could have just done theme songs and still wouldn't have been one of the greatest rock bands of all time. So I was really disappointed, Raj, as you did some research on, to see that they did not put out a soundtrack for this.
No. I looked for it today. I was like, I have to buy the soundtrack. Which, by the way, save your money and buy the best of Queen. It's like 3 or 4 albums, and you'll get the same experience. But yeah, it's interesting. The same thing happened with you guys in Revenge of the Nerds. Awesome soundtrack in the movie. Didn't put out a soundtrack, or the soundtrack that they put out had none of the great songs in it.
But the difference in this one, there was a logical reason for it. When the movie came out in the U.S., the movie was not out in Europe. So if Queen had released the album prior to the movie coming out, the timing didn't work. And then right after that, Queen released A Kind of Magic in June. Even though they didn't release the full album, they did do a Highlander video where they reenact the final scene in the movie with Queen performing.
That's
and I
right.
gotta tell you, I drove home today with my system as loud as it could go, with the speakers blaring, and it was just firing me up for this. I haven't been this fired up since Rocky IV.
Well, good, because there's a lot of training montages similar that happened in Rocky IV. But let's dive into the movie. In 1985, Connor MacLeod, also known as the Highlander, is in New York City. In an arena parking garage, after a wrestling match, Connor is confronted by a fellow immortal, Iman Fossil, and decapitates him, upon which an energy surge destroys several cars around him. He hides his sword just as police swarm to the exit to the garage and arrest him.
Okay, my first question. I want to understand the Highlanders, understand the entire gathering, the quickening, because sometimes they don't tell us in the movie. Number one, you can't go and kill someone in a church because it's etiquette. Okay. Is it etiquette to almost announce yourself? Hey, I'm over here. Or can you sneak up on someone and just cut their head off from behind?
So I got the impression that the Highlanders can't sneak up on each other because they're aware of each other. Like when Sean Connery, when Ramirez comes up and confronts Connor MacLeod, there's that lightning, there's like the sense of it. When they're around each other, I think they sense it. But to maybe one who's unaware of his immortality, I think you have to give the guy a chance to defend himself. Otherwise, it's just not satisfying.
Okay, so I just wanted to dispel one thing here. They're not called Highlanders.
No.
Highlander is just the name of Connor MacLeod because he's from the Highlands of Scotland. What the fuck are they?
They're immortals. That's what they're called.
Why?
Ramirez explains it. He says it's like, why does nature do what nature does? Like, there's no reason for it. Why does the sun come up? Why does the world spin around? Immortals are immortals because they're immortal.
He's just doing what my old boss used to do, which is just re-ask questions when I used to ask him questions. Listen, if you ever want to act like a smart person, this is just a life pro tip from Roger Roper. If someone asks you a question you don't know the answer to, ask them a question back. They'll be dumbfounded.
No, I think I don't want to jump to the end because the end, I believe, gives the answer. The prize at the end is almost all knowledge, is an understanding of life. That whoever wins the gift at the end is going to serve as an asset to mankind. That's what the goal of it was. We don't know who created them, who set the game in play, but the goal at the end is to create someone who can help humanity.
So do all Highlanders or immortals know that they're immortals?
No, of course not, because MacLeod gets snuck up on and almost killed. He didn't know. But I didn't want to get into my next question here, but you kind of led me to it. It seems like it's a little bullshit, right? You have Ramirez, who's been alive for, what was it, a couple thousand years, like 2,000 years?
He's from Egypt. He's an Egyptian.
Yeah, and then you got MacLeod coming in at like a later round. He's only 400 years old. That's kind of bullshit.
You think so?
That's like somebody getting a bye through the first 4 rounds of a tournament.
Here's what I don't understand about immortals, okay? Do immortals age? Do they age slowly? Do they just reach, like, because he doesn't age at all throughout 400 years.
I thought maybe at some point in your life you're struck by lightning and then you become immortal. Because you're right. Otherwise, you'd be immortal from birth and you'd have just a bunch of kids running around that didn't age, and that wouldn't be too exciting.
Right.
But it would suck to be immortal at Sean Connery's age when you got to fight some of these younger dudes.
I agree. I definitely agree. But I mean, Sean Connery looks pretty spready, although it does look like they used a couple body doubles when he's running, because Sean Connery explicitly says in his contract, no running whatsoever.
Yeah, I got to tell you though that this movie makes it clear how far we have progressed in the way that they film the realistic portrayal of what it must have been like on the battlefield, because this looks like maybe there's 140 guys going at each other. It looks comical. You don't feel, the real drama of it. Anyone who watches Game of Thrones, the end of last season, when Jon Snow, spoiler alert, is facing down Ramsay's mounted soldiers, that's stressful. This looked like LARPing.
That's right. Well, not just LARP. I mean, let's not even get to the big epic battlefield scenes. Just the scene in the parking lot where they're fighting each other. That's come a long way.
Yeah, speaking of dudes who, immortals who aged, the guy that Connor's fighting, Iman Fazil, like that guy, he looked like they just could have picked any guy at random and I think that the stunts followed along. You're looking at this guy and suddenly you've got like some sort of a gymnastics competition going on. I wanted to know where the fight was.
Do you know who he was? He was he's the stunt coordinator.
That was the stunt coordinator?
That's the stunt coordinator, and they put him in the role because he actually did the backflips.
No.
That guy did those flips?
Wait a minute. Amon Fossil, the old guy, you're telling me that he actually did those backflips?
The stunt
actor who played her.
That, from what I understand, stunt coordinator.
That can't be true at all.
I'm going to go back and research it again. But yes, they said it was more common in the past that the stunt coordinators would sometimes take roles as, one of the villains, one of the bad guys actually.
Sure.
Yes, I believe they aged him up, but that was, from all I've read, it's the stunt coordinator.
That kind of brings me to a point that I wanted to address, which is there's just a laundry list of people who appeared in this movie who deserved the leading role more than Christopher Lambert.
Yeah.
Because that guy could have been Connor MacLeod for all I care. I mean, he could probably he spoke English better, and he was able to do, the stunts. Several of the guys who were in Clan MacLeod, I thought could have been fine. Shit, the wrestlers would have been okay with me. This was literally probably the worst guy you could pick to do the role.
Yeah. Well, first of all, do you equate wrestling with like ancient battles? Like, is that the first thing that you think of?
I think that's what they were going for. Like, they were trying to show that he was having flashbacks as a result of seeing this fierce combat. And maybe in the 80s, that was, wrestling had a more serious role in our lives. I don't know. When I was a kid in the 80s, I didn't take wrestling that seriously. So I thought it was very much a stretch. But this movie tried to do made a big effort to take all the things that were really popular in the 80s and just wedge them into a movie. So like you've got ladies with big bangs, katana blades, you've got wrestling, you've got, beheadings. So before ISIS co-opted them, like this is the 80s. This is the 80s, and they were just like, okay, let's make a laundry list of all the cool shit in the 80s and cram it into a movie. So they checked that one off of the list early.
I definitely forgot how cool beheadings were. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, that was originally supposed to be an NHL game, but the NHL didn't want to be associated with that kind of violence, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, early 80s hockey didn't want to be involved with violence. Okay. But like, how about that overhead camera shot? Like, I took that note. Listen, this is a time and era where, like, we talk about this a lot. Practical effects mattered, right? And this movie, unfortunately, used a lot of really bad practical effects. But, like, they must have blown their budget on that overhead sweeping shot of the... like, is this an outdoor arena or whatnot? Because you can hear the helicopter blades. Like, there's no drones. There's no digital cameras. How close is that helicopter getting to those people?
That's not a helicopter. I'll go back to my days. That's my old stomping ground. And that's Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey, masquerading as Madison Square Garden. So that's where the New Jersey Devils played. It's right. It used to be adjacent to the old Giant Stadium. Oh, some of the best concerts of my life I've ever seen there. Metallica, the And Justice for All tour.
Right.
Iron Maiden, Seventh Son.
So what you're saying?
Building. I think they tore it down.
So what you're saying is they had to fit a small helicopter inside the arena.
That was the wire cam, similar to what you see at the NFL now, where they will suspend a camera between 4 wires that go out to the corners. The following, I think, month, they tried to use the camera filming another film in Tokyo, and the actual camera came off of the cables. So it was the last time that they had used it for a while until they perfected it. But at the time, this was groundbreaking.
Yeah. Well, my major problem that I have with the movie is that there's zero context for a lot of the scenes in the movie. Like, why are they fighting? There's no reason, like, I just had so many problems with they're not explaining why they're going to battle, why he's fighting in a parking garage, why the police are arresting him right away when there were 0 witnesses in this parking garage.
Yeah, I agree, Raj. There's 2 ways you could do this. One is you could show us present day, and there's a mystery there. Why are they fighting? And then we see little revelations from the past that then explain it to us. And in the end, we get a full picture of what's going on. Or you do it chronologically, where you build from the 1500s until you get to this point so we know everything, we understand. They didn't do either. They didn't set up a mystery, nor did they give us a clear narrative. They kind of hodgepodge it together. And yeah, this fight, you don't even know who to root for at this point.
No.
Hold on. How could you complain? You've got lights that are flickering. You've got sprinklers going off, car hoods revving, lights flowing, people swinging swords, Queen blaring. This is the way you fucking start a movie.
Yeah, and you spent 45 seconds of the battle of him under a car reaching for a sword.
That's right. Just reaching.
Go around the fucking car, dude.
How shitty were cars in the 80s? First of all, there's no computers in cars in that time. Why is lightning making the lights go off? And it makes 0 sense to me. But anyway,
hold on. You got problems with lightning going off, but not immortals.
Yeah, no.
People living thousands of years.
Absolutely. Listen, we just saw Terminator 2. We were big fans of lightning balls and naked men traveling through them.
Listen, lightning is gonna fuck your Prius up too, though. I mean, let's be real.
Right, but it shouldn't in my 1986 Pontiac Grand Am with twin carburetors. So anyway, the story then takes a hard flashback to the time of 16th century Scottish Highlands in the village of Glenfinnan on the shores of Loch Shiel. Connor and the Clan MacLeod prepare for battle against the Clan Fraser. Connor is struck down by a mysterious man wearing a skull helmet, the Kurgan.
Right. So the first thing I noticed about this is, again, going back to what Big D talked about with just how far battle seems to come. I see the bagpipes going in the battle, and I go, wow, they're really trying to emphasize that this is Scotland.
That's right.
Why the hell are bagpipes? Turns out this really happened. So back in the day, there were what they called war pipes, and guys would be playing bagpipes just walking through the battle. This practice actually continued. The British discovered that the Highlanders, the actual Highlanders, people from the Highlands, made wonderful soldiers. They were very tough. And so they would have Highland regiments that would go to combat. And they still kept the bagpipes with them all the way until the early days of World War I. These guys were marching into combat in World War I, still playing the bagpipes when Germans had machine guns.
Yeah.
So that ended pretty quickly.
But I got to tell you, when you see actors that you grew up with today and they're significantly older, that's when it really clicks how much older you've gotten. Mm-hmm. When I see James Cosmo come out, I'm like, you know what? I totally recognize him. And I recognized him in this movie. He plays Angus MacLeod.
Yes.
I remembered him from Braveheart as William Wallace's sidekick, the one who throws the giant stone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe, he's so typecast in that role. It didn't even click until I looked it up. He also played Jorah Mormont
Yeah.
on Game of Thrones, the old
Yeah.
bear, the Lord Commander.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. How old are we?
But he voices, I think, one of the Vikings in How to Train Your Dragon.
But God, he went from 30 to like 80 in no time.
Well, all right. So this is the equivalent of the Hatfields and McCoy, right? This is the Scottish. I didn't even know it was Clan Fraser until I looked it up on Wikipedia, because again, they give zero context. Did you know that they were fighting the Clan Fraser? At any point, did you hear them say the word Clan Fraser?
Yeah, when I watched the movie, I thought that this was just the Kurgan's men. Like he had his Team Kurgan, and they were going to fight. Like they were trying to rid the valley of this evil.
Mm-hmm.
No, they have a conversation where Kurgan says, "Remember our deal. I'm fighting with you, but nobody touches MacLeod."
Yeah, but did they ever say we're the Clan Fraser?
Yeah, well, it came up in the subtitles, so somebody in the background was at least saying it. But I think you're complaining about the way we are introduced to the plot, to the characters. I liked it. I think the transitioning from New York back, it's my opinion. I thought the back and forth transition did a good job of trying to get you up to speed without having to give us 25 straight minutes of exposition of the Scottish Highlands.
Yeah, but speaking of exposition, it's going on during action scenes.
That's right.
Like Christopher, like Connor MacLeod walks out there and he is literally saying to anyone who will listen while holding his sword away from his body, "Nobody will fight me." And then the guys are running away from him, literally saying, "No, not MacLeod, don't fight him." Like, we get it. So in a sense, they're not taking the time to explain stuff that might be confusing and give us some context, but they are explaining shit that we can see with our own eyes.
Not only that, but they're saying, "Don't fight MacLeod. Everyone's a fucking MacLeod."
I thought he was just being very polite. But how about you don't have to engage someone who only engages you? If people aren't going to fight back, take the opportunity. Just start hacking away. They're killing your family members.
Yeah.
Don't try to be like, set up a date like, "Hey, you and me, let's fight." No, just start hacking, Jon Snow style.
Yeah, but not only that, there's exposition of them like going out to battle. They're talking as they're like in the parade session out to the battlefield. At some point they could just say, "Hey, the Clan Fraser are stealing our sheep or our haggis or whatever is in fucking Scotland. I don't know. Write us, Marty. What did they fight about in the 15th century or the 16th century in Scotland?" But like they could have explained something like that, but instead they're like, "The last time we battled." Listen, that's I'm not going to do an accent because I can't do it. But they're like, "The last time I was in battle, I peed my kilt." How do you pee a kilt? Like, that is, I think the entire reason they designed a kilt was so you couldn't pee in it.
Well, Raj, I don't know about you. My dick faces forward, though, so you can pee a kilt quite easily.
Well, you gotta have a good old Scottish dick that just, it's so big it hangs down and it pees to the ground. But like, thank God for Mel Gibson, right? Thank God for Braveheart, because could you imagine being Scottish and this being the only representation of like your historic battles? Like, could you imagine if they just stopped making American war movies in the 1930s or the 1940s?
I want to know the last time somebody said those words. Thank God for Mel Gibson.
Oh, I think Mel Gibson says that every day. But like, they were like Scottish individuals were so excited that Mel Gibson created Braveheart. They erected a statue of him. They say it's William Wallace, but it's Mel Gibson as William Wallace in one of the famous battlefields.
It seems like the Scottish are super cool. That's another one of the things I heard behind the scenes. A lot of the extras in the battles were locals who just wanted to be in the movie and performed essentially for Scotch. They would get them drunk each day. They would hang out on set. They'd come back the next day, and they were just very pleasant people and had a great time filming. It sounds like we need to go to Scotland.
Yeah, in the summer of '99, I had the pleasure of living in England, Ireland, and Scotland while I was studying over there. And Scotland was by far the best people I think I've ever met in the world. They're just wonderful people, especially in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Just, God, I love the Scots.
Yeah, but not only is Connor quite possibly the worst fighter ever, he's begging, he's asking people. When he gets into a fight there's not even a fight between he and the Kruger. The Kruger just fucking stabs him. Yeah, you're done.
So at first, blush, I didn't like this either. I was like, wow, he just got waxed really quickly. But there's a purpose to it, and it's to show that he develops. Like, he needs to be mentored. He's not a great fighter. You can be immortal and not know how to fight, which is great because if you look at stuff like superhero movies, somehow they just know how to fight. Like, no one ever teaches them. They just know. This was nice. You could be immortal but still be shitty at fighting.
You have seen every origin movie of superheroes, right? Batman Begins, Superman, Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man, where they explain how they get their powers and they fight.
No, they explain how they get their powers, but like Spider-Man, for instance, right? They never explain how he learns to like punch and kick and crap. Superman never does really train. That's why when all things are equal, Batman kicks the shit out of him because Batman actually had to train. He's the only one that they really show training. Everybody else just kind of like, I've got powers, now I know how to fight.
Well, the movie then hard cuts again to 1985. The police release Connor as they have failed to get any information from him. One of the detectives involved, Brenda Wyatt, is an expert in metallurgy and recognizes Fasil's sword as an extremely rare Toledo Salamanca broadsword. Later, Connor returns to the garage to retrieve his own sword, but sees Brenda looking at the crime scene. She then finds metal shards embedded into a concrete column and saves them later for analysis.
All three of us put down notes regarding the police, just kind of talking about this is just an 80s phenomenon where the police are really terrible people. And again, I was a child in the 80s. I thought the police were like superheroes, and I didn't really understand this, but I should have paid more attention to the movies. The scene, the police station scene opens up, and literally the first line in the police station, I think, is his Vietnamese neighbor ate his dog. It's like immediate Asian racism out of the detectives, and that's how we kick off.
Yeah, I think a lot of murders went unsolved in the 80s in New York. MacLeod cuts a dude's head off, spraying blood everywhere. Mm-hmm. Yet somehow CSI doesn't find blood evidence on his trench coat.
Not only that, but they don't find the sword that has just been lackadaisically thrown up.
Well, God, did you see the crime scene? You have like 40 cops walking around. You've got just fans in the area. It was a complete mess. There was no control over that crime scene. She's pulling out shards from the concrete. Mm-hmm. There's no chain of evidence. They're just putting shit in their pockets. They're just grabbing evidence. It was Wild West back then.
Well, I'd just like to point out how thick her book was about metallurgy. How much can you go into metallurgy?
Well, I got to tell you, and I was going to bring this up. I'm a handy guy. I enjoy building things. If you have a chance or you want to learn about metallurgy, History Channel has a show called Forged in Fire, where they take modern day blacksmiths and give them a challenge to create random weapons throughout history. It is fascinating to see what goes into it, and it'll give you more of a respect for when she's talking about the blade that had 200 times folded. The shit people can create with just a piece of metal, some fire, and a hammer is incredible. Forged in Fire, History Channel.
Yeah, but and again, Gene, I want to go back to the police brutality here, because as the cops are arresting Connor MacLeod, who also goes, I guess, in this time in the 80s, Nash, that's his name. His name is Nash. He's taken on whatever. It's Connor MacLeod. They throw him up against the car. They stick a gun against the temple. They're like, how did they understand that? Like this, it made no sense to me. Like, that was the one thing I was like, well, at least, police brutality existed in 1986.
I mean, just remember, he did just punch a cop before they put the gun to his head, so they might be a little pissed about
Did
that.
They?
Yeah, he punched a cop.
Yeah, but he's just exiting a garage.
Oh, please. He was doing Tokyo Drift in the entire parking garage. They said, where are you going in such a hurry? He had the convertible top down, and he was just screeching the tires. So they said, hey, This might be somebody to talk to.
Listen, you grew up in New York, so if you're just, that's how they treat you if you're exiting a parking lot a little bit fast? They throw you up against the car and stick a gun against your head?
There's no parking under Madison Square Garden. It's Penn Station. It's a train station.
Then they take you back to the old police station and interrogate you using. Listen, it's shocking. We did the Breakfast Club, and there's a word that's spray painted on the lockers that's also used in this movie. And just in this day and age, and again, we're not trying to say like safe spaces or whatnot here, but it's still shocking to hear that word just thrown about in a big Hollywood movie.
Yeah, I totally agree. When people harken back to, I don't have a position either way on this. People will harken back to an earlier time and go, "Oh, I wish we could have movies that weren't so PC." And then you got other people who say, "Oh, well, good riddance that stuff." I agree kind of with both in the sense that a movie like Blazing Saddles, right? It just would not be the same if it wasn't written exactly the way it was. But I also would not appreciate if it was made today. It's something about the era that makes it okay to do it, and it makes me appreciate it, but I wouldn't want a movie today to be using the same language.
And there's certain words that just convey a level of hatred that is above other words. And the word faggot to me is such a hateful, angry. There's other words that could convey that same feeling that I'd be like, you know what? I don't condone it, but I could live with it. But some words they're vile. And this is one of them that you hear it and it just makes you kind of sit up.
It is strange that, the big taboo words that we talk about are shit, fuck, bitch, stuff like that. When really faggot or cunt is a much worse word, but they were used much more liberally in the 80s and even the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, but also they use this time to make fun of New Jersey. They're like, this is the first decapitation. Oh, but that was in New Jersey. Like, who cares about those fucks over there? So, I mean, was that a thing, Big D? Like, growing up in New York, like, were you like totally against people from New Jersey? Did you hate them? Was there like a Florida State rivalry?
The only thing, Jersey sucks. It's called the Garden State. And you go right across the bridge. It is one of the most polluted industrial areas. There's some nice parts, but Jersey just wishes they were New York.
With the exception of Brigantine, South Shore, Jersey is beautiful.
So in another flashback to the Highlands, the wounded Connor is taken back to the village and everyone assumes he will die. In the evening, Connor succumbs to his battlefield injuries and dies. When he makes a full, remarkable overnight recovery and comes back to the life, the village is convinced that it's the work of the devil. The villagers attempt to have Connor executed, but he is instead exiled by the clan leader Angus out of mercy.
I mean, if your immediate family member comes back, I might think it's a bit strange, but if we just keep it between us and don't tell the town folk, what's the point? I would, if my brother, if I had one, got stabbed, I would just shut my mouth and be like, hey, that was kind of strange. Listen, if there's something going on here, just don't kill me. But the fact his whole family turns on him, I didn't buy it.
Well, I mean, let's break this down. Like, Big D, like, if your wife got stabbed and died, right, and the next day she awoke and she came back in. She's like, "Hey, what's up? Like, how's everything?" Would you be upset? Would you think it's the work of the devil? Like, how would you immediately react?
I wouldn't care what it was the work of, as long as she was still nice and she was cool. I'd want her back. I don't care how it happened.
Yeah, couldn't you just as easily assume it was the work of like God, like a miracle?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the whole story of Jesus?
I don't think you got gut stabbed by the Kurgan.
It was 3 days. That's right. If it's 3 days, it's God. It's 1 day, it's the work of the devil. But you talk about like recognizing actors, like, holy shit, the Kurgan is the guard from the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, he's I don't know. I mean, dare I say, kind of like at the beginning, at least with the skull helmet, he kind of looked kind of handsome, and then he sort of deteriorated as the movie went.
I think he looked perfect for the role, and the deterioration as he goes through and becomes more beastly.
Right.
They had originally planned to do more makeup, but the actor has some form of allergy to latex. So he had filmed a movie previously, I think it was Frankenstein, where they had done him up, and he actually swelled up and had a reaction for a few weeks. So they had planned for much more than just the neck piece. But he's an intimidating dude. I thought he was perfect, believable, creepy. And it helped that they shot him always from below. That made him look much taller than I believe the actor is.
Yeah. But do you think the village just hated Connor? Do you think they just couldn't get rid? Like, this is like just an excuse to get rid of him?
Dude, you're talking the 1500s. Any excuse you could find. You could use religion wielded as a sword, whether that's why there was a drought, that's why there was too much rain, that's why the potatoes weren't coming in, that's why MacLeod came back to life. You always had a default excuse. It was the devil.
Yeah, but at the same time, you see several scenes where people are like, oh, shit, he's back. You know, the woman who was like, you know, allegedly in love with him or whatever.
Yeah.
She's meeting him. Even the guy who's giving him his last rites is like, well, shit, I got to get out of here. Like, he doesn't wait for him to die. He's just like, well, I got other shit to do. Got to go. Bye.
Fuck, the worst would be, what if you just got hurt, you weren't immortal, and you somehow pull through? Is the town going to kick you out too and think you're the work of the devil?
Dude, you know that shit happened all the time.
fuck, maybe if you just had a good immune system, all of a sudden I'm a heretic and they're going to fucking kick me out of town?
At one point, Clancy Brown, who played the Kurgan, he is 6'4", so I mean, the guy's not that tiny.
Yeah, but all right, listen, I get it if you die and you come back. Like, that's not the devil. If you have your arm chopped off and it grows back the next day, we're going to have a word. Like, we're going to have a conversation about that. You know what I mean? Like, that's the one instance that I could say, maybe there's something else at play here.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we see the Immortals don't have. They do not regenerate or heal. They might survive it, but the wound on Kurgan's neck does not heal. So I believe if you cut an arm off, I don't think it's growing back.
Whoa, so wait a minute, we're not using Wolverine rules here? Like, this is not regenerative at all?
No, if that was the case, that neck wound would have cleaned up over time.
Yeah, but I mean, it's there. I mean, you see the scar.
So technically, I think you could cut his arms and legs off. He'd still be immortal. I would expect over time, right? If you go to war, we saw him in World War II, you're living a hard life. There had to have been people missing arms and legs and people who got injured through their normal day. That would suck to play at a true handicap, like down an arm.
He gets shot with a machine gun. So you're saying he doesn't heal?
No, he does, but the wounds will heal, but the scars remain. They don't disappear like Wolverine, like where it spits the bullets out and all of a sudden the blood just wipes off.
But again, flashback to 1985, Connor's living under the alias Russell Nash and is a wealthy antiquities dealer. Meanwhile, the Kurgan takes up residence at a seedy motel. Connor tails Brenda to a bar, but she leaves quickly. She then tails Connor, but the Kurgan attacks them both. The fight is interrupted by a police helicopter, and everybody flees. Brenda analyzes the metal fragments and discovers them to be from a Japanese katana dated about 600 BC, but made with advanced technology for the era. She then makes a date with Connor in an attempt to entrap him. Connor recognizes the ruse and tells her to stop digging and then leaves.
I think disguising yourself as an antiquity dealer is brilliant. It's one of the best disguises you could have. It allows you to explain your knowledge of the past and artifacts and everything that you own, plus maintaining your wealth through generation. I think that's great. And we see that he's had to pass that down year after year. It works in the 80s because the paper trail was a bit hard. You had to go to the library to dig it up. Today, it doesn't work so well, but back then, great job on him for planning.
Can we talk about why Kruger got spooked by a police helicopter with a spotlight?
Why is he stopping? Okay, he's immortal, right? Mm-hmm. God forbid they do capture him and put him in jail.
Right.
A life sentence will be eternity. He cannot get locked up. He cannot get captured because there's nothing he can do. He'll be stuck. And that doesn't jive with me because half the movie, he's running around crashing cars. He's assaulting people. He's doing everything to bring attention to you. There's nothing worse that could happen to an immortal than being incarcerated. You're stuck.
But can you really assemble a sword?
Oh, yeah. Like a decorative piece, but his entire blade, the main blade is in two pieces with a screw. I don't want to go into battle with that thing.
No, the thing's going to fly off, right? It's not even a screw. He just puts the tip right on. Just slides it on in. There's no glue. There's no anything like that. But Connor's apartment is sick, right? Is that just like devalued property in New York City at the time because New York was just a cesspool in 1986 that you could afford an apartment that sick?
He bought it 5 generations ago. I think they said he bought it in the 1700s. And he just keeps deeding it down to the next generation. When his old identity dies, he wills it to the next one.
Right. But he's got this woman that works with him that it's kind of a creepy backstory.
Yeah, it's bizarre. We see, I guess we want to understand that he's a good guy, so we do a flashback to World War II. He rescues a young girl. She looks maybe 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. They wanted to establish that was his secretary, assistant, his female Alfred. It's also really clear that they've had some form of intimate relationship. The way she touches his face, the way they look at each other.
Yeah.
Is that like a Woody Allen kind of thing here? It's not his daughter, but he did raise her. should he be becoming intimate with that child he raised?
That's the creepy vibe that I got from that. Like I was like, ew, I can see why this would get cut. Not the whole Nazi scene for violence, but the whole thought of someone, an immortal, raising this child and then possibly having a sexual relationship with, and then just like bifaliciating on her to go hang out with this metallurgist. Like I'd be pretty pissed if I was her. In the past, Connor lived an idyllic life with his wife Heather. One day, the mysterious and flamboyant Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez appears and begins tutoring Connor in the history of the immortals and sword fighting. Ramirez explains that they both belong to a group of immortals who constantly fight one another but can only be killed by complete decapitation. When one immortal decapitates another, the winner receives a transfer of power from his or her fallen opponent called the Quickening. Eventually, all the immortals must do battle until there is only one left alive. The last survivor will receive the prize. Ramirez tells Connor that the Kurgan, by that time the strongest of the immortals, must not win the prize, or mankind will enter an eternal dark age. One night while Connor is away, the Kurgan attacks, decapitating Ramirez and raping Heather.
Okay, this section of the movie was both my favorite and least favorite part. And here's why. Is that they tried to introduce kind of our first look at romance here, and it's painful. Watching Connor and, as he calls her, Blossom, Heather, he basically is the kissing is weird, the lovemaking is weird. It just puts me off. But the payoff as that horse comes leaping in, and we get to see the underside of a horse for some reason. When I say I'm a fan of this movie, I'm really a fan of Sean Connery in this movie. Everything else can go to hell. That's what I love to see. I just don't understand why they picked Sean Connery to play a Spaniard with Egyptian roots. I still don't get it.
All right, so Ramirez shows up. He's a metallurgist working for the King of Spain. He's like, I'm going to train you even though I have to fight you in the end. Again, this makes no fucking sense to me, guys.
The reason he's helping, no matter whether it's him or someone else, anyone has to win except for Krugen, because that would just be dark times for humanity.
I assume there's good immortals and bad immortals?
I don't think there's good and bad. They're just they're all out in self-interest. But the idea being that look, someday it might have to come down to two, but if you got two guys who are not the worst dude ever, it's better than having the worst dude ever win.
All right. But so they do an entire Rocky montage complete with a mountaintop sword battle that leads to a final sword battle test in the woods. Did you get the same impression that they were about to kiss?
It was a bit weird. Sean Connery is on his back, and he climbs on top. It was strange, but I didn't take a big, what really bothered me. Your sword as an immortal is your lifeblood. It's the most important possession you have. Why the fuck are you going to train on the edge of a mountain? You see that Sean Connery's blade gets slung out of his hand. They must have spent 2 days trying to search and find his blade at the base of that mountain.
Yeah. But there's also strange things that happen that I didn't understand. I get that there's Yoda like type, wisdom that's being imparted upon from Sean Connery, and the Rocky montage where he's training on the horse and there's running and gallivanting. But then just some of the lines when he throws him overboard and he has to learn how to breathe underwater. And he's like, I'm not a fish, I'm a man, and the fish fall out of his kilt. And then let yourself feel the stag. What was that about?
What do you think it was about, Raj?
Well, you want to talk about something fucked up. You know that stag? They glued the horns onto that animal. At that time of year, the horns had fallen, so they had a vet come in, sedate the animal, glue the horns on. That shit wouldn't fly today. And if you see the one scene where the stag is standing in the water, that is a National Geographic stock video.
Right.
But the real animal ran off, and they found it 25 miles away with the fake horns ripped off.
The other thing I have a problem with the entire movie, the swords just destroy walls and car rooftops? Like, what?
Watched Forged by Fire. Those blades do some crazy shit. And that's not just movie magic. They're cutting through, barrels, essentially. Bamboo trees. Swords are amazing without movie magic.
All right. In Central Park, Connor meets a longtime friend, fellow immortal Sunda. They talk about the gathering, an impending gathering of immortals which precedes the final battle, and they joke about old times. Brenda has now discovered that Connor has been alive for centuries, living under false identities, faking his death every few decades, signing his assets over to children who have died at birth, and assuming their identities. She confronts Connor, who demonstrates his immortality. After this revelation, Brenda and Connor become lovers, although Connor is reluctant following another flashback in which Connor's wife Heather dies of old age in his arms in 16th century Scotland. Ramirez has earlier explained that immortals cannot have children and must let go of people in their lives, including loved ones. Ramirez reveals his Japanese katana was made specifically for him by the father of his third wife, and remarks that, like her, his katana is one of a kind.
Well, I'll just ask the question. Connor has a problem, and it's most immortal movies deal with it, is as you age, the pain of watching those you love around you die. The two of you, would you take immortality if it meant watching those that you love slowly grow old and die in front of you?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably say yes too, but it would really suck. It would really suck.
Well, I mean, because listen, one of the things that I didn't get, the scenes that felt most out of place is when he's flashing back to a drunk duel that he has, I guess, with it's like in the early American century, like around the revolutionary times.
It was Boston. Yeah, I thought it was a weird change of tone, and I think it actually hurt the film. Yeah, it was funny, but
was it?
Yeah,
like,
it was funny because he's laughing, he's joking. It's kind of interesting to think, hey, how could your immortality almost lead to just shenanigans throughout history? But it was total. It pulls you out of the mood that you're. Yeah. It almost turned slapstick comedy, and it didn't need it.
Yeah, this was the attempt at anytime they attempt comedy and it's not Sean Connery. Unintentional comedy, it just doesn't work in this movie. But the Kurgan then finds Sunda, kills him, and wounding a man who witnesses his beheading. The Kurgan also finds out about Connor's relationship with Brenda by stalking them at the zoo. He kidnaps her to draw Connor out. After a climactic battle at Silver Cup Studios in Queens, Connor defeats and beheads the Kurgan. He receives the prize, which manifests itself as a massive quickening. Now mortal and capable of having children, Connor returns to Scotland with Brenda. Connor now has awareness of people's thoughts around the world and promises to use his gift to encourage cooperation and peace in mankind.
I talked about some of the fat in this movie that they could have trimmed. We didn't need this second love story. Connor is fearing for his life. They've had a showdown in the church. They're going at each other. What does he choose to do? He goes on a date to the Central Park Zoo the next day. He's not on guard. He's not worried. Kruger is actually sneaking up behind him while he's on his date. Cut that shit.
So this is indicative of actually, speaking of fat, of the luxury that we have today with our entertainment. If you look at Bollywood and a lot of other foreign film production, and early American film production, people had very limited entertainment money, and so they wanted the action and the laughs and the drama and the romance all in one movie. That's why you see back in the day there had to be some love interest, and with the exception of Beverly Hills Cop because he was black. But essentially now, today, we can afford so much entertainment that we can have stories that don't involve any romance or have stories that don't involve any laughs, like Taboo. So it's really a matter of again, people had limited incomes. They wanted to go out and see a movie. They wanted every part of it. And some 80s movies did a wonderful job of wrapping that all in there. And some of them, like this, it was unnecessary. It was forced. It was stupid. And honestly, insulting to the memory of his wife.
What I felt was insulting as an audience member is when Kruger, I assume that they're trying to go for the fact that he's descending into madness, right? With each quickening that he gets, he's turning crazy, he's driving, he's cutting roofs off the cars of people, his appearance is changing, he's putting safety pins in his neck.
Like we said before, you would want to stay as low-key as possible, stay under the radar. That entire crazy montage where he's driving the old woman and then, Brenda, cut that out. It didn't need it. We didn't need Tackleberry, the gung-ho Marine, to come out there and shoot him up. All wasted space. Remember, we were talking early in the cast about how in the 80s, whether it was the camera or things that they could do, special effects, or the way they could do in production, Do you know how they did in that final battle, the sparking swords?
I assume something very low budget and practical effects.
They hooked the two swords up to car batteries, and they had them wired up the costumes of the actors, so when they would touch swords, the swords would actually spark. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever touched any of these 12-volt, whether you're jumping a car, that shit gets hot quick.
Yeah.
They could only shoot for a few minutes because the swords were actually getting hot.
Yeah.
That shows you how low budget back in the day you had to do everything practical.
But I go back to on Terminator when we saw them appear, Terminator 2 when we saw them appear, and you saw that lightning and it just looked shitty. This looked great. I thought that when the swords clashed, it actually looked pretty good. The sparks were very believable and exciting.
Yeah, but did anyone else get like a Return of the Jedi final duel between Luke and Darth Vader here? Like, they're dark, in front of an illuminated background, sparks flying from their lightsabers, they're dueling. I got this was totally ripped off of Star Wars.
No, you're talking Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, Star Wars Return of the Jedi.
Oh, okay. No, I thought because there's the battle in Empire at the end, and Jedi is the one that's backlit.
Yeah,
they focused more on the visuals. It is iconic. You see it, you remember it. Whether it's the fight on the rooftop with the silver cup sign or into the warehouse, the backlit battle is beautiful to see. The sword fighting's terrible, but I think it achieved what they wanted.
I didn't understand until I actually read the Wikipedia plot here that at the end he turned mortal. Did you guys get that?
In the voiceover at the end, he says that he can now father children. He can hear the world, presidents, scientists. He is now can have kids, and he will eventually die. So, yes, the gift of knowledge plus mortality is what he got.
Right. So that's the end of the movie. But in doing some research, I realized that there's an entire subtext of this movie that I picked up along, and then I had to like Google it for myself to see if I was the only one who thought this. Guys, have you heard about this theory that there's an entire illusion that this is a man's journey into accepting his own homosexuality?
I'm always loath to go into the whole, okay, this is about being gay thing. And only because, one, I don't think it's usually true, but two, people take that as some sort of somehow being homophobic. However, I'm very curious on this one because there were a lot of overtones in this movie, just like when we talked about The Lost Boys. So I like to hear the case.
Okay, so here's what some people say. Right, so I'm going to use the Fox News version of this. Some people say that the immortals portrayed represent homosexuals who have had to hide their sexuality, and the catchphrase, there can only be one, actually means no one can know. And when you think about the 1980s at this time, homosexuality was pretty in the closet.
God, they used faggot in the movie, so that shows you what the culture and the atmosphere was.
Also, Krugen has an eye on MacLeod before the battle and cautions to his men to leave him be, saying the line, "The boy is mine."
Okay.
There are no female immortals. They cannot have kids. Living in relationships with women will only bring them pain. They normally fight in dark, secluded places, hidden from view. They have to live a secret life. No one can truly know who they really are.
Like what I'll say is if you read the opening scroll of the sign, the actual words that come up on the screen that tell you the history, it says something to the effect of, we've lived in darkness all this time. We were among you and you had no idea. I was totally expecting it to be more overt than what I had read about people saying the subtext being the homosexual culture, and that they've mentioned in the movie that when another one is around you, you can feel it. You can sense that they're there and you're drawn to them and you have to seek them out.
So it's like a gaydar.
Very well possibly could be. But I don't think it was as bad as the Lost Boys.
Yeah, doing unholy ground is forbidden. The church rejecting their lifestyle. And
When your family and your town find out you're immortal, you're possessed by the devil and they drive you out.
That's right. Yep. Sean Connery playing the role of an older gay man, very flamboyantly dressed. He's very effeminate, showing the young boy the ropes and being a mentor to him, saying it's okay to live this lifestyle. I'm your brother. We are the same. It's okay to come out and accept this. And I want to show you the ropes. And he also represents, I think, that the lifestyle has been around for centuries, dating back to ancient Egypt. It's okay to accept your lifestyle. So I
have one more for you, and I don't know if it was intended to be, whether it was supposed to make any social commentary on it. And then I went and read the lyrics of the actual song "Prince of the Universe," which is played in the beginning. And I hadn't ever paid really attention to the lyrics, but I'll just give you some highlights. Remember, the movie's about fighting to the death and immortals. So, fighting and free, I've got my sword in my hand. I'm here for your love, and I'll make my stand. I don't know where love really fell into the big plot. Another line, no man could understand me. My power is in my hand. Oh, 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 people talk about you. I'm a man that will go far, flying to the moon and reaching for the stars with my sword and my head held high. I've got to pass the test this time. And then there's a later line where he says, bring on the girls. And he goes, come on, come on, come on. Like, please. I don't know if it was intended, but the case could be made.
Yeah, and with Queen, many of the songs have a subtext there. Freddie Mercury, remember, never actually officially came out. It's not like he just came out one day and said, hey, I'm gay. But so, it's widely thought that 1975's Bohemian Rhapsody was his coming out song. And even in that, you have to kind of look through the lyrics to really find it. So I would buy that. However, having a lot of gay friends and being immersed in gay culture in California, in Illinois, in New York, being around a lot of gay men, they have certain cultural references and icons that they look to, movies and songs and everything that are part of the canon of being gay. Highlander never came up like once.
But Queen leads me also to believe it's possible. When did Queen ever do an entire album for a movie? They did 8 songs. It was almost as if they had a conversation, found out that the movie was secretly championing that cause, and that got them interested in it. Yeah. Because it wasn't a blockbuster movie that they'd say, hey, we got to be part of this.
Yeah.
It almost seemed like it was a pet project for something they truly cared about.
Big D, to answer your question, the entire Flash Gordon soundtrack.
Which is also very big in the gay culture.
Yeah, Flash was huge in gay culture.
Flash is huge in gay culture, though.
Right.
So Queen, huge, did the album for Flash Gordon. Highlander, not huge, but Queen also did. So I just think that he's like battling his demons, and when he slices the head off of the Kruger and unlocks it, he transforms. He becomes aware. He now understands, and he's become at peace with who he is. And it's okay to live this lifestyle. And at the end, he's wearing a pink shirt, which today, everyone can, it doesn't matter. People wear pink shirts. No one cares. But if you wore a pink shirt prior to 1994, people were asking you questions.
I guess you didn't watch Miami Vice. Don Johnson and Crockett, those were two hot, straight dudes.
Miami Vice, big in the gay culture.
They're still hot, straight dudes wearing pink.
Were they? Crockett, yes. Tubbs, they lived on a boat with a gator. Were they?
Mm-hmm.
Were they? Anyway, so that concludes that concludes our review of the movie Highlander. If you have comments or anything, then please be sure to send it in. Our email address is hosts@shatthemovies.com. Now's the time of the podcast where we break out our Shat scale and give our ratings for this movie. In case this is the first time listening, a 0 wipe movie means it is a perfect movie. It's like going to the bathroom and having your morning ablutions and not having to use your Charmin roll whatsoever. It's perfect. You drop and go, so to speak. Number 5 is it's basically Operation Dumbo Drop, where you're having to use Charmin Extra Fluff double rolls 3 times. You ate ate at a some haggis, and your stomach did not agree with it. So 0 is good, a 5 is bad. I'll start with you, Big D. How many wipes would you give this movie?
Unfortunately, this was the first movie that really destroyed my memory of a positive childhood experience. I wanted to like it. There were pieces that I enjoyed, things that worked well. The only thing I will want to watch or listen to after this again is the Queen portion of it. Right. The movie itself is bad. It is flawed. For God's sake, they picked an actor who didn't speak English. I think the lowest, I'm looking at my scores here, the lowest I gave was a 4.5. This is almost there. This is a 4.5.
What was your 4.5?
Yeah, Westworld.
Oh, okay. Gene.
I'm with Big D on this too. I came into this movie remembering it very, very fondly, and then I realized that what I liked about this movie wasn't the movie at all. It was the TV show from 1992 to 1998, because Christopher Lambert is actually in that too, in the pilot.
Right.
But I remember watching both, and I knew that one was a movie and one was a show, but I had a hard time differentiating psychologically what I had the affinity for. The show was actually much, much better than the movie, in that Connor's son, Duncan, or not son, but there's another MacLeod who's raised by the same clan, Duncan MacLeod, and he never achieves, the prize, and that makes a lot more sense. So I'm going to have to go with Big D on this. I'm going to go 4 wipes on this movie. It does not stand the test of time. It was pretty bad.
Right, and there's another show on Starz called Highlander right now. It is not about immortals. It is not about that. So don't get trapped there. I'm going to give this movie our first five wipe movie. This movie is terrible. I hated it. I thought I was going to like it. I did not. It took me a while to get this is a stain on my brain. This is a 5 white movie for me. Gene doing the adding of that. I think it's 4.5, right? No, it's 4.6 repeated. That's what this is. So we'll call it 4.7. That's how many wipes this movie would take to get off of your respected butts. So that concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat The Movies. We're also on Facebook. Just search for Shat The Movies Podcast. Our website, again, is shatthemovies.com. Next week's movies, Big D, you can vote on, I think, up to 7 weeks. What is next week's theme, though, that we're voting on?
Oh, next week, I think, is a lock. It's Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
But to that, also to the listeners, to try to get our schedules in line here, the voting will now close on noon Friday so that we have the weekend to watch it. So we will announce. So by Friday, I mean, there's no way Pulp Fiction loses, so we can pretty much say it's Pulp Fiction.
Nice. I can't wait to watch that. One of my favorite movies, so I'm excited to go back and actually talk about that. Our email address, if you have any suggestions or want us to do that, we're getting a lot of really great suggestions, like Oscar movies from a certain year or Charlie Sheen movies. Listen, if someone wants to write in and do Val Kilmer movies, just a little hint there for Gene, that'd be really great. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, leave a 5-star review. It really helps the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, and soon-to-be American Gods. In April, you can find all that information on that website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Gene Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next Thursday for our Pulp Fiction show and review. Also follow us on Twitter. You can find our bios on the Shat The Movies Twitter page. Thanks so much for listening. We will see you next time on Shat The Movies.
Should have watched Entrapment.
But it was sweet when they killed Ellis.